There is a certain kind of reaction that reveals more than words ever could. The way someone responds when you succeed. Because people who genuinely care about you don't need your failure to feel comfortable with themselves. They can see you rise without feeling personally threatened by it. They can celebrate your progress without immediately comparing it to their own life. But hidden resentment often becomes visible when your position changes. You get a promotion. You start earning more. You improve your appearance. You build something successful. You become more confident. You receive attention. You achieve something you once struggled to achieve. And suddenly, someone who seemed supportive becomes strangely quiet. Maybe they congratulate you, but the enthusiasm feels forced. Maybe they immediately change the subject. Maybe they say, "That's good, but it's not a big deal." Maybe they remind you of something you did wrong years ago. Maybe they compare your success with someone else's. Maybe they begin pointing out everything that could go wrong. One reaction means very little. Patterns mean everything. You should never become paranoid and assume that every person who doesn't celebrate you is secretly against you. People can be distracted. They can be struggling with their own problems. They can simply have a different personality. The important thing is repetition. Watch what happens consistently when your life improves. Does their behavior become colder? Do they start minimizing your achievements? Do they suddenly become more critical? Do they find reasons to explain why your success isn't really impressive? Do they seem more interested in the weaknesses behind your success than the work that created it? That is information. And information should make you more observant, not more emotional. One of the clearest signs of hidden resentment is subtle comparison. You tell someone good news, and instead of celebrating with you, they immediately bring up something they accomplished. You buy something you've worked hard for, and they tell you about something more expensive. You reach a goal, and they explain how someone else reached a bigger one. You improve yourself, and suddenly they need to remind you that you're still not perfect. The conversation becomes a competition you never agreed to enter. This is where emotional discipline matters. Don't compete. Don't start proving that you're better. Don't exaggerate your achievements to make them uncomfortable. Don't react with arrogance. Simply observe. Because when you start competing with someone who secretly resents you, you have already accepted their frame. You're allowing their insecurity to decide your behavior. Instead, continue building. Let your results speak, and learn something else. Not everyone deserves access to every detail of your progress. You don't have to announce every goal. You don't have to reveal every financial improvement. You don't have to explain every opportunity. You don't have to share every future plan before it becomes reality. Sometimes privacy is wisdom. When someone repeatedly responds to your success with subtle negativity, reduce the amount of information they receive, not as punishment, as protection. There is another important distinction. Healthy criticism and hidden hostility are not the same thing. Someone who cares about you may warn you about risks. They may question your decisions. They may point out weaknesses in your plan. But their goal should be to help you become better, not smaller. Constructive criticism leaves you stronger. Constant criticism leaves you doubting yourself. Supportive honesty challenges your behavior while still respecting your potential. Hidden resentment attacks the potential itself. That is why you should pay attention to how criticism makes you feel over time. Are you being challenged to improve, or are you repeatedly being reminded that you're not enough? There is a difference. And sometimes the most revealing moment comes after you succeed beyond what someone expected from you. People who genuinely respect you may become even more supportive. People who were comfortable with the old version of you may become uncomfortable. Your growth changes the balance. And when your growth threatens someone's ego, their behavior can change. Don't take that personally. Don't become bitter. Don't try to expose them. Just take note, because the goal is not to identify enemies everywhere. The goal is to become psychologically observant enough that you stop confusing polite words with genuine goodwill. Watch actions. Watch patterns. Watch how people respond when your life improves. Because sometimes the people who are happiest when you struggle reveal themselves the moment you begin to rise. Another behavior worth paying attention to is the person who repeatedly disguises insults as jokes. At first, it can seem harmless. They make a comment about your appearance. They joke about your intelligence. They tease your ambitions. They make fun of your relationships. Then, when you react, they smile and say, "Relax, I'm only joking." And that sentence can become a shield for behavior that would otherwise be recognized as disrespect. Of course, not every joke is an insult. Healthy relationships contain teasing. Friends and family can joke with each other without hidden hostility. The important question is not whether someone makes jokes. It is what the jokes consistently target. Do they repeatedly target your insecurities? Do they make you feel smaller? Do they embarrass you in front of other people? Do they continue after you've made it clear that you don't appreciate it? That is where the behavior becomes meaningful. A single joke can be nothing. A repeated pattern is information. Someone who genuinely respects you may make a joke that goes too far. But when they realize it hurt you, they usually adjust. They don't keep testing the same wound. They don't repeatedly expose the same insecurity. They don't turn your vulnerability into entertainment. They don't wait for an audience before making the joke. A person who repeatedly does those things may be communicating something deeper than humor. They may be testing how much disrespect you'll tolerate. And this is where psychology becomes important. People often test boundaries gradually. They don't begin with obvious hostility. They start with something small, a subtle insult, a dismissive comment, a joke about your ambition, a sarcastic remark about your success. If you ignore it, they may become more comfortable. The behavior escalates because there was no consequence. Soon, what began as teasing becomes a pattern of undermining you. This doesn't mean you should react emotionally to every comment. That would give the behavior even more power. Instead, become observant. Listen to the words, watch the timing, notice the audience. Pay attention to whether the person seems to enjoy your discomfort. That tells you more than the joke itself. For example, someone may tease you privately and immediately check whether you're okay. Another person may wait until several people are watching before making a comment designed to make you look foolish. Those situations are not psychologically identical. Public humiliation disguised as humor is often about status. The person isn't simply trying to be funny. They may be trying to position themselves above you while maintaining plausible deniability. If you challenge them, they can say you are too sensitive. If you stay quiet, they get away with it. That's why calm communication matters. You don't need a dramatic confrontation. You can simply say, "I don't appreciate jokes like that." Then, watch what happens. A respectful person may apologize. A defensive person may laugh it off. A manipulative person may turn the accusation back on you. They might say, "You can't take a joke," or "Everyone else thought it was funny," or "You're becoming too serious." Don't get distracted by the argument. The issue isn't whether the joke was funny. The issue is whether you communicated a boundary and whether they respected it. That's the real test. Because people who respect you can adjust. People who need access to your insecurities may continue testing them. And there is another reason these jokes can be dangerous. They can slowly change how you see yourself. One comment may not matter, but repeated comments can create doubt. You begin questioning your appearance, your intelligence, your ambition, your personality. Your choices eventually, you may start hearing their voice inside your own mind. That's why you should be careful about repeated criticism disguised as humor. Healthy humor makes you feel connected. Constant humiliation makes you feel diminished. Learn the difference. But don't become suspicious of every person who jokes with you. Look at the pattern, the intention, the response after you speak up, and whether the relationship contains genuine respect. The goal is not to label people as enemies. The goal is to stop ignoring behavior simply because it comes wrapped in a smile. Sometimes the joke is not the message, the reaction after you object is. And when someone repeatedly uses humor to weaken your confidence, the next question becomes even more important. Are they simply being insensitive, or are they quietly undermining you while pretending to help? Another pattern becomes important when you start noticing that some people don't attack you openly. Instead, they quietly undermine you while presenting themselves as the person who is trying to help. This is more difficult to recognize because the behavior comes wrapped in concern. They tell you they're only being honest. They say they want what's best for you. They warn you about your plans. They question your decisions. They point out every possible problem. And because they sound concerned, you may assume their intentions are good, but intentions should never be judged only by words. Watch the pattern of their advice. Does it consistently make you wiser and stronger? Or does it repeatedly leave you more doubtful, more dependent, and less confident? That distinction matters. Genuine advice may challenge you, but it usually gives you something useful to work with. It helps you see risks you hadn't considered. It may hurt your ego, but it improves your judgment. Covert undermining feels different. You share a goal, and they immediately explain why it probably won't work. You share an opportunity, and they focus entirely on everything that could go wrong. You become excited about an idea, and they make you question whether you're capable of executing it. You start becoming more confident, and suddenly they begin reminding you of every mistake you've ever made. The pattern creates hesitation, and hesitation can become a form of control. If someone repeatedly convinces you to doubt your own judgment, eventually you stop trusting yourself. You begin asking them what they think before making every decision. You look for their approval. You wait for reassurance. You become dependent on their opinion. And this is where help becomes something else. It's influence. The important question is not whether someone ever gives negative advice. Everyone does. The question is whether they can also recognize your strengths. Can they celebrate your progress? Can they acknowledge when you did something well? Can they offer criticism without making your entire character the problem? Can they support your independence even when you make a different choice? Healthy people can say, I don't agree with this, but I respect that it's your decision. That sentence contains an important element. Respect for your autonomy. Someone who constantly undermines you may instead say, you're making a mistake. Then, you never listen. Then, I was just trying to help. Eventually, you may become afraid to make decisions without their involvement. That is when you need to step back and observe. There is another form of covert sabotage that often looks like advice, discouraging you at the exact moment you are becoming more ambitious. You tell them you're learning a new skill. They laugh. You tell them you're starting a project. They tell you the market is already crowded. You tell them you're improving your finances. They explain why you'll probably fail. You tell them you're changing your lifestyle. They say you're taking yourself too seriously. One comment is nothing. Repeated discouragement is different. Ask yourself what happens when you succeed despite their warnings. Do they celebrate? Or do they immediately find another reason why the success doesn't matter? That response can tell you whether the person is actually invested in your growth. You also need to watch whether their advice benefits them. Sometimes a person discourages you because your success would change your relationship with them. If you become more independent, they lose influence. If you become financially stronger, they can no longer pressure you. If you become confident, their opinions carry less weight. If you build a new social circle, you may depend less on them. Suddenly, their concern has a hidden incentive. This doesn't mean every negative opinion is malicious. Sometimes people genuinely worry because they see risks you don't. That is why you should never react based on suspicion alone. Instead, ask for specifics. What exactly concerns you? What evidence makes you think this won't work? What would you recommend I improve? A genuine person can usually explain their reasoning. They may even help you strengthen the plan. Someone who is simply trying to discourage you may rely on vague statements. You're not ready. It won't work. People like you don't succeed at this. Those aren't solutions. They're psychological pressure, and you should learn to separate the two. Don't reject useful criticism just because it feels uncomfortable. Use it. Improve. But don't hand over your judgment to someone simply because they speak with confidence. You are responsible for evaluating advice. You don't have to accept every opinion. Sometimes the most powerful response is simply, "I'll think about it." Then make your own decision. Because people who genuinely want you to succeed will want you to become stronger, not more dependent on them. Their advice may challenge you, but it won't require you to become smaller. And once you learn to recognize covert undermining, you'll be ready to notice another revealing behavior. The person who remembers your weaknesses far more carefully than they remember your strengths. Another behavior you should learn to recognize is the person who quietly collects your weaknesses and later uses them against you. This can be especially dangerous because you may have given them that information willingly. You trusted them, you opened up, you told them about something that embarrassed you. You shared an insecurity. You explained a mistake from your past. You talked about a relationship that hurt you. You admitted something you were struggling with, and because they listened carefully, you assumed they cared. But listening and caring are not always the same thing. Some people collect information because they genuinely want to understand you. Others collect information because information gives them leverage. The difference becomes visible when conflict appears. Pay attention to what someone remembers when they are angry. Do they remember your strengths? Do they focus on solving the problem? Or do they immediately reach for the most vulnerable thing you've ever told them? You said you struggled with confidence, and suddenly they question your ability. You told them about a past failure, and they bring it up every time you disagree. You trusted them with a private relationship problem, and later they mention it in front of other people. You admitted a fear, and suddenly that fear becomes the subject of jokes. That is not ordinary conflict. That is the weaponization of vulnerability. And vulnerability is powerful because the information people share with you is often information they would never reveal to a stranger. It tells you where they hurt, what they fear, what they regret, what they want, what they are insecure about. That information should create responsibility. When someone uses it to humiliate you, control you, or weaken your position, they are showing you something important about their character. Not everyone who does this secretly hates you. Sometimes people act badly because they are angry, immature, or emotionally overwhelmed. But repeated behavior matters. If someone repeatedly stores your vulnerabilities and brings them out whenever they need an advantage, you should stop treating them as a safe person simply because they are close to you. This is where trust needs to become more intelligent. You don't have to stop opening up completely. You don't need to become emotionally closed. You simply need to become more selective about who receives your deepest information. Trust should grow gradually. Let people demonstrate discretion. Let them demonstrate empathy. Let them demonstrate that they can disagree without turning your private life into ammunition. You can start with smaller things. Share something personal and observe what happens. Do they keep it private? Do they repeat it? Do they tell someone else just because they were worried? Do they use it to get attention? These small behaviors tell you whether deeper trust is appropriate. And there is another warning sign. The person who constantly asks personal questions but rarely offers their own vulnerability in return. They want to know your weaknesses, your relationships, your financial problems, your fears, your plans, your mistakes. But when you ask about them, they remain vague. This can create an imbalance. They learn a great deal about you while you learn very little about them. Information becomes one-sided, and one-sided information can become one-sided power. That doesn't mean every private person is manipulative. Some people simply value their privacy. Again, look for patterns. What matters is what they do with what you reveal. You should also notice how they behave when other people are present. Someone may remember your private mistake and mention it casually in a group. Then they laughed. You laugh because you're uncomfortable. But they have already communicated something. They are willing to trade your dignity for social attention. That should tell you something. A trustworthy person protects your vulnerability, especially when you are not there to defend yourself. They don't need to use your weaknesses to win an argument. They don't need to embarrass you to feel powerful. They don't keep a hidden list of your mistakes, waiting for the perfect moment. And if someone repeatedly does those things, the answer isn't necessarily confrontation. Sometimes the wiser response is reduced access. Stop sharing sensitive information. Keep conversations lighter. Don't reveal your next major move. Don't explain your deepest fears. Don't give them additional information that can later become ammunition. You are not punishing them. You are adjusting trust according to evidence. This principle applies far beyond family or friendships. In business, relationships, and social situations, people often reveal what they intend to do with information by how they treat the information of others. If they constantly gossip about everyone, they may eventually gossip about you. If they expose private details to gain social advantage, assume your secrets are not automatically safer. Watch, learn, adjust, because trust isn't proven when someone listens to your vulnerability. Trust is proven when they protect it after learning it. And once you understand that, you'll begin noticing another revealing sign. The person whose attitude toward you changes dramatically depending on who is watching. Another revealing behavior appears when someone treats you like a completely different person depending on who is watching. In private, they may be friendly. They may talk to you normally. They may ask about your life. They may even act as though the relationship is strong. But the moment other people enter the room, something changes. Their tone becomes colder. Their attention disappears. They make dismissive comments. They interrupt you. They stop acknowledging you. Or they suddenly act as though being associated with you is somehow embarrassing. That shift matters, because genuine relationships tend to have a certain consistency. The exact behavior can change depending on the environment, but the underlying respect remains. Someone who respects you privately should not suddenly need to diminish you publicly just to improve their own position. This is where social psychology becomes important. People are often influenced by status, reputation, and the opinions of groups around them. Someone may treat you well when there is no audience because they enjoy your company, but treat you differently when other people are watching because they want to appear superior, independent, or socially dominant. That doesn't automatically mean they secretly hate you. But if the pattern is repeated, it deserves attention. Watch how they behave when someone more powerful enters the conversation. Do they suddenly agree with everything that person says while dismissing your opinion? Do they laugh at jokes about you that they would never make privately? Do they distance themselves from you when a higher status person appears? Do they reveal private information about you to gain attention? Do they become supportive, only when doing so makes them look good? These moments reveal priorities. A person who consistently changes their treatment of you according to the audience may value social positioning more than genuine loyalty, and that creates a trust problem. Because you don't know which version of them you're actually dealing with. One version exists when the two of you are alone. Another version appears when there is an audience. And if the second version repeatedly sacrifices your dignity to improve their own image, you should become more careful about what you expect from them. There is another form of inconsistency that is even more subtle. They may become extremely friendly when they need something. They call you, they compliment you, they ask for your opinion. They make you feel important. Then the moment they get what they needed, the warmth disappears. You're no longer receiving calls. Your messages receive short responses. Your achievements suddenly don't matter. Their interest fades. Again, one isolated incident doesn't prove anything. People become busy. Circumstances change, but repeated patterns reveal priorities. A person who only becomes warm when they need access to your resources, connections, attention, or expertise may not value the relationship as much as they value what you provide. This is why you should watch behavior across different situations. How do they treat you when you're useful? How do they treat you when you're not? How do they behave when you're successful? How do they behave when you're struggling? How do they behave when nobody important is watching? How do they behave when there is something to gain? The differences tell a story. And the more inconsistent someone becomes, the more carefully you should manage trust. This doesn't mean confronting everyone who behaves differently around other people. Sometimes people are insecure themselves. Sometimes they become socially awkward. Sometimes they change behavior because they are nervous. You are looking for a repeated pattern of disrespect, humiliation, manipulation, or opportunism. Not a single awkward interaction. That distinction protects you from becoming paranoid. You don't need to label someone an enemy. You simply need to recognize that access should match evidence. If someone repeatedly makes you look foolish in public, don't give them sensitive information. If someone repeatedly dismisses you around certain people, stop relying on them for validation. If someone repeatedly uses your presence to improve their own social position, stop expecting loyalty from them. You don't need revenge. You don't need to expose them. You don't need to prove that you noticed. Sometimes the strongest move is simply becoming less emotionally invested. Be polite, remain calm, observe, and adjust your expectations. Because one of the biggest mistakes people make is trusting the private version of someone while ignoring the public version. Both are part of the same person. And when you stop judging someone only by how they treat you when you're alone, you begin seeing the full pattern. That clarity becomes even more important when you notice the final behavior. Someone who enjoys having access to you, but becomes uncomfortable whenever you become more independent, confident, or difficult to control. There is one final pattern that brings many of these behaviors together. The person who likes having access to you, but becomes uncomfortable when you become more independent. At first, they may seem supportive. They enjoy your attention. They enjoy your company. They know they can call you when they need something. They are comfortable with the version of you that listens, helps, agrees, explains, and remains available. But then you begin changing. You become more confident. You become more disciplined. You establish boundaries. You become financially independent. You develop new friendships. You stop asking for their approval. You become more selective with your time. And suddenly, their behavior changes. They may tell you that you've become arrogant. They may say you're not the same anymore. They may criticize your new standards. They may make jokes about your confidence. They may question your decisions. they may suddenly become distant. This is where you need to pay attention, because sometimes people don't miss you. They miss the access they used to have to you. That distinction can completely change the way you understand a relationship. A healthy person may notice your growth, feel surprised by it, or even disagree with some of your choices. But underneath that disagreement should still be respect. They don't need you to remain weak so they can feel strong. They don't need you to remain confused so they can remain influential. They don't need you to remain dependent so they can feel important. Someone who genuinely cares about you may actually be happy when you become more independent, because your growth doesn't threaten their value. But a person with hidden resentment may experience your growth differently. Your confidence becomes a challenge, your boundaries become an inconvenience, your independence becomes a loss of control. Your success becomes something they have to compare themselves against, and that can reveal a deeper problem. They were comfortable with the old version of you because the old version was easier to influence. You explained yourself. You asked for permission. You looked for reassurance. You accepted their opinions as authority. You gave them access without requiring trust to be earned. Then you changed. And when you changed, the relationship changed. This is why growth can reveal people's true attitudes. Your success doesn't always create someone's resentment. Sometimes it simply exposes what was already there. When you were struggling, they felt comfortable. When you started improving, something shifted. When you stopped needing their approval, they became colder. When you became more capable, they started criticizing. That doesn't automatically prove hatred, but it is a signal worth observing. Look at what happens when you become less dependent. Do they encourage your independence, or do they constantly try to pull you back into old habits? Do they celebrate your progress, or do they minimize it? Do they respect your boundaries, or do they repeatedly test them? Do they support your new relationships, or do they try to isolate you? Do they want you to become stronger, or do they repeatedly remind you of who you used to be? These patterns matter, because someone who benefits from your weakness may not celebrate your strength. And this is where you need to become emotionally disciplined. Don't confront everyone. Don't accuse someone of secretly hating you. Don't turn every change in behavior into proof of betrayal. Observe first, give situations time, look for consistency. Ask whether there are alternative explanations. Maybe they're struggling. Maybe they're insecure. Maybe they're adjusting to the fact that the relationship has changed. Not every uncomfortable reaction is malicious. But if the behavior repeatedly pushes you toward dependence, self-doubt, isolation, or reduced confidence, then you should take it seriously. And your response should be simple. Protect your growth. You don't have to shrink yourself to keep someone comfortable. You don't have to return to an old version of yourself because someone preferred you that way. You don't have to apologize for becoming more disciplined. You don't have to hide your success. You don't have to stop improving because someone else's ego cannot handle your progress. You can remain respectful. You can remain kind. But you can also become more selective about access. Share less with people who repeatedly misuse information. Spend less time around people who consistently undermine you. Stop seeking validation from people who only support you when you're beneath them. And most importantly, don't allow suspicion to turn you into a bitter person. The goal is not to hate those who hate you. The goal is to understand people clearly enough that their behavior no longer controls your decisions. People reveal themselves through patterns. Your job is to notice. Their job is to choose who they become. And when someone repeatedly shows you that they are uncomfortable with your growth, believe the pattern, not the excuse.